Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the HeartStream Musings podcast. I'm super excited today because I have another guest. Her name is Maria from Self Love for Mothers. And she and I found each other on Instagram. I love making internet friends. And I just remember, I think it was, I just stalked your content, Maria. I think I got a notification that maybe you liked a story of mine. And usually I like interacting with people that engage with my content, or I engage with other people's content. And I saw on your page that you focused on self-love and inner child healing. And it was through the mother lens, which is something that I haven't really tapped into because obviously I'm not a mom. But I do have an older sister who is. And so I think, anytime I find someone who also gravitates towards this work and focuses on self-love and inner child work, I just love to hear their story, dive into it. And I'm so excited that you're here with me. And you are in Norway. So really cool that we get to connect and that you're international.
Thank you so much. I'm very excited to be here too. And thanks a lot for the invitation.
Of course, of course. And so, for people, I always like to start off with just an introduction. And so I'm really curious, and that's what piqued my interest of how did you even get on this whole self-love journey, inner child healing, especially through the mother lens and that perspective?
Yeah, so for me, the self-love and the inner child healing journey, they were absolutely linked to motherhood because after I gave birth, I experienced a very dark postpartum depression. And it has been going on for months. I was also in a kind of toxic marriage at that time. And this all was contributing to a very dark suicidal depression where I didn't feel my own value as a mom. I didn't feel I was any good for my child. I didn't even feel that my child loved me. And the way out of this painful experience was through coaching and through inner child healing and self-love. So I started talking to different coaches, actually not within self-love, but within transformative coaching. And they helped me to see how I am creating this experience. I already knew it, but I could see it again, or I was reminded of it. And when I felt that I was not a victim, but I was a creator of my experience and I could actually do something about it, that's when I found a course about self-love and inner child healing. Even if it wasn't called that way, it was
Yeah.
more like solving generational traumas. But the way it was happening was through looking within and meeting your inner child. And that's where the inner child healing journey started for me.
And so that's interesting because you said that originally you started off with transformative or transformational coaching. And it's so interesting because I often hear that word. How did you even know to find? I'm always interested in how people find coaches. How did you know, like, okay, maybe I'll just go with a transformational coach, especially as someone who was going through this period of depression. And so I'm curious how you found out about transformational coaching.
Right. That wouldn't be the first choice of any
Right.
mom. I have been into this transformational coaching for several years, actually. Before I got pregnant, several years before that, I first started my Reiki healing practice in Oslo, doing Reiki healing, energy healing. And then as I was working with clients, I had to talk with them. And I wanted to talk with them in the most powerful way. So I started studying transformational coaching. And I was very fascinated by it because the principles of that coaching understanding are the same as the principles of, for example, like deep Buddhist understanding, which I had
Mm.
studied in several years. So I was so fascinated by this inside out understanding, as they call it, that I
Uh-huh.
have been practicing it for many years. And then I would say that when I got this postpartum depression, I somehow maybe forgot it. Maybe I didn't forget it, but I didn't have enough energy to even somehow think about it. Or in a
Right.
way, I was creating an experience of being a victim. And from that state, I couldn't move on anywhere. So that's why I started looking for coaches. And since I like this understanding, that's the first where I looked. And it
Mm.
was very helpful because they helped me understand that I wasn't a victim.
Mm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What was that victim mentality that you were experiencing in that moment?
I felt that I was a victim of my own decision to have a child and get married.
Mm.
I
Mm-hmm.
felt that I was a victim of my ex-husband that didn't behave supportingly.
Yeah.
And I felt that I was very much in love with him, even though he was causing me a lot of pain. And I would feel so bad that I wasn't loved the way I wanted to be loved.
Mm-hmm.
So I felt like, yeah, a victim of everything. And then talking to these coaches, it made me realize that I'm the victim of my thinking, and that's it.
Oh, poof. Okay, you're healed. That's it. You're
Right.
just your
And
thoughts.
but of course that's not just like it's not a perfect solution. It's just an
Yeah.
indication where to look. Because when I
Mm.
realized that, then I was wondering like, why am I thinking this way and why am I in this situation? And that's where the inner child healing came into the picture, because
Mm. Mm-hmm.
everything we are thinking is something that someone has sometimes said.
Right. And so, as you were in this relationship, do you want to share more about just sort of the dynamics and how it influenced your decision to dive into self love and inner child healing more?
Mhm. Yeah, sure. So there were two things that influenced me
Mm-hmm.
into diving into self-love and inner child healing. The first one was becoming a mother. So when my baby would cry and scream or just in general feel uncomfortable, I would feel extremely stressed. And I felt like everything from inside myself was crying as well. And then
Mm.
I would give her the attention she needed. I would hold her in my arms. And from within myself, there was this voice that was shouting, like, and who is holding me? Why is no one holding me?
Yeah.
So that was like the first reason. And the second reason was definitely the toxic relationship with my ex-husband, because I felt that I was starting to hate myself for not being loved. So starting to love myself radically stronger was the only solution to not lose myself completely in that relationship.
Oh, wow. And so, when you had those feelings, I just love that you explained it so beautifully. When you had those feelings of just like, oh my gosh, who is holding me? How did you apply that inner child stuff as you were experiencing that? Because I haven't heard anybody talk about it that way of, as a mom, you just give so much of yourself. And, obviously sometimes people, you tend to overgive. And
Mhm.
so when you had that moment of who's holding me, how did you symbolically hold yourself or tend to that part of you that wanted that nourishment?
Mm, yeah, it was um, It was a very beautiful idea or analogy that I got at that
Mm.
time. I started imagining that I'm taking care of myself as a baby in addition to my own daughter. So
Oh.
I kind of imagined that I had twin babies, twin baby girls, and somehow I managed to find a way to communicate with myself as a child. So I would, for example, in meditation, I would go back to the moments of my childhood when I felt alone or
Mm.
hurt or misunderstood. And I would come as myself as an adult, I would come to myself as a child and kind of reach out with my hand to her and talk to her and offer her to do some nice things together. So we kind of became friends.
Oh, I know it's such an interesting thing, right? When you first meet your inner child, or, I think maybe you can relate to this when you work with clients, when you explain to them the inner child work, especially with healing or moms. Um, I find some people think, well, how is that going to help me fix my problems? Or how is inner child work? What do you mean, meet my inner child? That's kind of weird, or I don't understand that. And I find that visualization helps a lot, but I also remember when I was first doing inner child work, it was very strange, right? Because you mentioned meeting your inner child. Did you think it was, or like, how did you feel about that point of, okay, I guess I need to do inner child work because the self-love class told me I should probably dive into it. What were your thoughts about it?
I felt it made perfect sense, honestly,
Yeah.
because I felt that there were parts of me that had been neglected and that I had not been aware of for the most of my adult life. Like
Mm.
I had been living from the moment I became an adult and until my daughter was born. I had been living for so many years and never thought that I had any problems with my inner child or self love.
Mm.
I had
Mm.
always considered that I had a pretty okay childhood with some like kind of traumatizing experiences, but I didn't see that my inner child was actually so traumatized that it didn't have a chance to speak up at all.
Oh.
And so when this suggestion came up that you have to go back and talk to yourself as a child, it actually made sense to me because I felt like,
Mm.
yeah, there is something within me that hadn't been brought up to conscious attention for years, and it really was very effective.
Uh-huh. And then you also mentioned self-love in your relationship too. And you said that it was something along the lines of, disliking yourself because you couldn't feel love or you didn't feel loved. Can you explain more about that also, and just kind of what was happening in your world um as you were also experiencing depression with your child?
Yeah, that was really hard because I was losing my sense of self. I was in a way losing my sense of reality because I used to be a very confident person, and um, I chose I chose my ex-husband probably by the fact that he was even more confident than me. But that confidence, it turned out to be quite dark.
Mm.
And so, like, toxic in a way, like confidence that doesn't come from within, but is built on putting other people down. And I would experience this in our relationship, and I would feel with every day and week that would pass by, I would feel less beautiful, less attractive, less interesting, less valuable. So
Mm.
it came to a point when I felt like I was completely useless in a way. And that was really painful. And when I started doing the inner child healing work, it in a way I think inner child healing and self-love, they kind of come in a package, because you cannot do the one without the other. You really
Absolutely.
need the self-love to heal your inner child. So as I was doing the one, I started growing in the other one.
Mm-hmm.
And I started seeing my value as a person, independently of whether my husband likes me or not.
Mm.
And through this, I was able to move towards a breakup. Or he didn't want to break up with me, but I managed to feel confident and valuable enough from within myself to actually move away from him to my parents.
Yeah. And so when did you know that you were ready to leave, or how did you build up that courage to make a decision, because sometimes it's hard the minute you want to decide something, but then that runway from actually taking the action is
Totally.
much longer. And I know sometimes people want to, people are impatient in the healing process, or they want to bypass things, but what was that moment for you?
Yeah, totally. I first wanted to leave on the day of our wedding,
Oh,
because
uh-huh.
there was a huge drama when
Yeah.
I realized that he didn't really care about me. Even though I was pregnant,
Mm.
he couldn't put my interests even on the level of his interest.
Yeah.
So that day I thought I would leave, and then he persuaded me to stay. Then there
Yeah.
were several other moments like that when there were some uh, extreme dramas, after which I felt it didn't make any sense. No matter how much I love him, it doesn't make sense to be together with a person like that. And
Mhm.
each time he would find a way to persuade me to stay. Up until the time when I started loving myself so much that I
Mm.
didn't want to be hurt for any reason. Not for
Mm.
the sake of love, not for the sake of a family, not for any sake. I didn't want to be hurt. And
Right.
that's when I managed to leave. I asked for divorce. He didn't want it. And
Mm.
then I said I would just take some months break with my
Yeah.
family. And
Mhm.
then after that, I learned that all these months he was beating behind my back and
Oh my
telling me that
gosh.
I'm the one.
Oh
So
my gosh. Oh my gosh. It's like you had that intuition, and then you realize, okay, I'm going to follow this. But something so profound that you said was, um, it's almost like the external reasons of, like, it wasn't for my family, it wasn't for like other people, but it was for myself, that I didn't want to be through that pain anymore. And I think when someone
hmm
realizes, or when they love themselves so much, they don't tolerate that type of
hmm
behavior, even though it made them feel loved at one point, because sometimes there were good times, or it can be confusing. And so that's so beautiful that you found that, and you said, like, no, I deserve better. I don't want to be treated like this, and I don't want to be with you. So kudos to
Yeah.
you.
It was a very difficult decision, and especially when you have a child together, then it's extra difficult
Mm.
to take. And my own generational story, my parents' story, is exactly the story of not being able to leave your partner when they are toxic, for
Mm.
for the sake of family, or for the sake of me having a full family, as they used to say. So my parents would always, well, they would say that they didn't, they wanted to divorce since I was a kid, but they never did it until I was 18, because they wanted to give me a full family.
Oh.
So I grew up with these ideas that my mom and grandmothers would plant in my head, that like no one needs a woman with a child. Um, and
Mm.
There was a lot of fear for being a single mom. I remember when I learned that I was pregnant, that was the biggest fear I had, that I would become a single mom. And when I actually
Wow.
became a single mom, I felt such a relief. It's
Oh
so
my
much
God.
better than being in a toxic marriage.
You're like, okay, toxic marriage for being a single mom that apparently nobody
Exactly.
wants. Like, okay, I'll just be the single mom.
Yeah. And then it turned out that all these beliefs, limiting beliefs about being a single mom, they were from another century. Like it's not a big deal anymore nowadays to be a single mom.
Uh-huh. And that's so interesting that you talk about that because I think we shared about it last time where there's just it's not I want to say taboo, but there's almost like this mark on you if you have a child beforehand or that you're less desirable if you have a child. And then so for your family to tell you that ever since you were little, it makes so much sense of why you decided to stay in the relationship and get married, even though you're like, this is not right for me. But I've been told all my life that it's bad to be a single mom and that there's no room and no one wants a single mom. Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, it was a big fear. I was working a lot with that fear while I was pregnant and after I gave birth. And there came a point where I realized that being a single mom is much less scary than losing myself. That if I have myself and I'm single, it's much better than I'm in a relationship, but I have lost myself.
You know, and sometimes it's so interesting where you have that fear. It's like the fear of abandonment is worse if it's by another person as opposed to yourself. I don't know if you felt
Mhm.
that way, but it was so easy for me to self abandon in relationships because somehow if somebody else loved me, that meant that I was more lovable than if I just loved myself.
Mm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And so it's like
Looking for external validation.
yeah, totally. So it's almost just staying longer in the relationship, like what you spoke about, even though you know that by you doing that, you're abandoning you
Mhm.
essentially because you're not listening to your own needs, to your own feelings, your own intuition, undermining the ability to self trust
Yeah,
too.
totally, totally. And my intuition was screaming all the time that I
Wow.
was in that relationship. I would get all the time feeling that he didn't really love me and that he was
Mm,
kind of using me in some way, and that it wasn't sincere and honest from his side. And every time he would tell me that it was just a fear, and I used to think about, he would tell me that it was just a fear because I was
yeah.
traumatized in my childhood. And since I was, and I was
Oh.
just doing that inner child healing work, it made sense. Yes, I was traumatized in my childhood. So then I was thinking that I'm just like extremely fearful for no reason. Or like he was saying, you're paranoid for no reason. Right? So I really started like doubting my own sense of reality in a way, because
Mm.
I always used to trust my intuition before. But here I managed to misunderstand my intuition as fear and work with it as I would work with fear. So I would like journal, for example,
Uh-huh.
about the fact that I feel that he doesn't love me. And I would journal pages about this, persuading myself that he does love me because he tells me he loves me. So obviously he does. Or like I could feel it in some way. So I would find and justify for myself these things, even though my intuition was there from the beginning, waving the red flag.
Right. Like, hello, Maria.
Mm.
I know that's the hardest part is knowing because it's like when you did that transformational coaching, it was a lot about your thoughts create you to be a victim, right? And then if we like go by that sort of rule or that guideline of our thoughts create our reality, then why don't I just all of a sudden think that he actually loves me? Because let's focus on that evidence. But there's something internally inside you that was screaming, no, this feels fundamentally wrong. And I
Mhm.
think it's so hard to discern what is your intuition, what is your thoughts, what is self-sabotage.
Mhm.
So how do you go about that process of like, okay, no, this is my intuition and I know I'm right? Or am I just, kind of faking it and creating this false reality when really he doesn't love me, just in that kind of context? Because I find that is kind of hard to discern between all of those.
Mm. I feel when it comes to understanding whether someone loves me or not, what
Mm-hmm.
I have learned is that I have to look at the actions and just ignore the words, because
Mm.
the words can be anything. You can say anything, and apparently for some people it doesn't really mean much. So
Right.
he would always be telling me that I'm the love of his life and we are destined to be together for the rest of our lives. So like this didn't mean much. This didn't mean anything. And apparently he says that to every girl he meets. So
Oh.
what I have learned is that I have to look at how the person acts rather
Mm.
than listen to what he says.
Mm-hmm.
And then in terms of my own inexperience, like understanding whether it's a fear or the voice of my intuition, I feel that it's about where in the body we feel that experience, and
Mm.
how that experience feels, because the experience of fear is more like a contraction and experience of intuition is more like an expansion.
Oh, okay. So if you're listening, remember that, right? Because it's true. It's like the experience of fear is, I don't know, for me when I'm thinking about it, it's almost like a gut punch of
A
like,
contraction in the gut.
yeah, like it doesn't feel right, even though I can't logically explain it. And I think society oftentimes prioritize logic because there's fallacy in intuition or inner
Mhm.
knowing. Um, because it's very feminine to be in your intuition and I'm like, yeah, the patriarchy. Okay, that's another topic, but but it is true. And then when I feel like I'm connecting to my inner guide, my inner wisdom, it's very much, oh, there's that unwavering confidence
Mhm.
almost of that
Mhm.
knowing. So I love the way that you described it because it can be confusing of what is fear, what is me self-sabotaging, and what is really my highest truth, and how am I acting from that place?
Yeah, totally. I feel that feel connection to your intuition, or connecting
Mhm.
to your highest self or your highest truth, that feels like it really feels good. It feels
Mm.
like clarity, it feels like expansion, like lightness, or um love, kindness, warmth.
Yeah.
So when we are feeling something that is not that, it's definitely not our highest self talking.
No. And so what's it like being a client of yours or when people come to you? So typically, how do they even find you?
Probably through internet or friends of friends.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
And we start with just a short talk to see if I can help them and if they
Mhm.
are ready to be helped. And
Mm.
if it is a good match, then we start working together.
Yeah. So is it similar to kind of you experiencing you helping yourself many years ago?
Yeah, yeah,
Like your
in a
former
way.
self? Uh-huh.
In
Uh-huh.
many ways, I always see some reflections of me in my clients. And I always feel that
Mm.
when I heal them, when I help them heal, I help myself heal as well.
Yeah. So what are some of the tools that or how does self-love look like for you when you work with other clients who are mothers?
I feel it's very important to help them meet their inner child, because most people have
Mm.
never done that. And
Mhm.
it sounds like you said, like a wishy-washy
Yeah.
concept, but it's very real. And many people get shocked by how lonely and sad their inner child actually feels. So
Mm.
there is a lot of healing in just meeting them, acknowledging them, And then we start talking about this understanding how we create our reality and what they can do now as adults to
Mm.
actually support their inner child and reparent them in a way that would be beneficial for them.
Mhm. Mhm.
And for many people, it's not because they feel they're lacking self-love that they want to do the coaching. It's because of other symptoms. Like, for example, they have chronic conditions with their health, or they have chronic problems in their relationships with their partner, or their
Mhm.
kids are driving them nuts, or there are some outer symptoms of this inner work that needs to be done.
Mhm. It's so interesting, right? How symptomatic it is. Like,
Mhm.
it's like, oh, you need to work on your inner child because you're experiencing this, this, and this. But it is very true. It is very
Mm.
true I think that if you find yourself being too perfectionistic, like if you want to be perfect all the time, if it's hard for you to, or not hard, but if you want to be in control all the time, I think that's something too, or just feelings of low self worth or the abandonment or staying in relationships that aren't serving you because that comes from a lack of self-love, which goes back to what you were talking about of you weren't willing to tolerate that type of behavior towards yourself because you loved yourself and you
Hmm.
said, no, I don't want to accept that anymore. And so,
Totally.
mhm.
And I feel that as much as I love myself now, I would have never chosen to be in a relationship like that.
Wow. Wow.
So it was a huge lesson.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. So how does that look like for you now? Or how do you integrate self-love even with your child, right? We talked a lot about inner child healing. And so as you're growing this child, what does that look like for you?
Hmm. Yeah, I feel sometimes that the expression of this self-love in relation to my child is gentle parenting. If you have heard
Oh,
about it, yeah,
no,
no,
explain. Uh-huh.
okay, it's the approach to parenting when you don't punish your child, you don't scold them for things, you don't yell at them, you don't obviously hit them, like
Yeah.
you're just going away from that punishment paradigm,
Mhm.
and it's much more about connection.
Mm.
So it's quite popular these days, I would say. Many people do practice gentle parenting, and many want to be practicing but also face difficulties because we were not raised gently. Our parents did not feel their inner children, and
Okay.
they of course they were doing their best, but their best was limited by how healed they were within their own self.
Oh.
So
Mhm.
for most of us, I don't know how it was for you, but for most of the people I know and work with, our parents used to punish us or to yell at us.
Right, right. There's almost, yeah, I was spanked when I was little. I was so scared.
Yeah.
But it's so common to have that type of parenting where there were consequences if you didn't behave,
Mm-hmm. Mm.
this rigidity. But how do you it's like, okay, so my brain is like, oh, but then if there's no punishment, then how does the child know what's appropriate behavior versus not appropriate behavior? Like how would you deal with that if your child was misbehaving?
Right. So the first question I feel to ask yourself when
Yeah.
your child is misbehaving is the child misbehaving, or is the child just being a child
Oh,
and you are
that's so
expecting
good.
too much of that child?
That is so
because
good. Uh-huh.
mm, because we were not allowed to be children. We were like expected to understand reason and effect and consequences and everything since we were like 3 years old. I
Uh-huh.
remember I would be punished for throwing food on the floor. And when my own child started throwing food on the floor, I realized she doesn't have like executive control developed enough in her brain to stop herself from doing it. So how can I be mad at her? It's not her
Mm.
fault. She's just
Uh-huh.
not developed enough to stop herself from doing this impulsive action.
Oh.
Obviously, I will react. I will be like, oh, no, what are you doing? I will have to clean this again, or something like this. But I don't punish her. And I
Uh-huh.
always tell her, like, it's okay, baby, don't worry. I will clean up. You know, it's not good. She says, no. Oh, and she knows herself. I don't need to tell her. She says, I'm sorry, mommy. I did it by mistake.
Aw, that's sweet. That's sweet. That's,
Mm,
that's really interesting because you are right. Sometimes when parents scold their children, it's because it affects them and that extra mile that they have to do. So, like you said, oh, I have to clean this now. It's so messy. But you're right. Like, if a child is a child and they don't have the years of experience that we as adults have, they don't
mm,
know that that is not okay. And so
mm.
it's like you said, um, that gentle way of letting them know and notifying them, like, oh, okay. Like,
And it's not only that they don't have the years of experience, their brain literally is not developed fully.
mm-hmm.
So, we have different areas in our brain, and some of them develop before the others. So, this
Mm-hmm.
outer frontal part that is responsible for executive functioning, for actually stopping our impulses, it's not developed in them. They
That's
just cannot stop themselves.
oh, so yeah, if they don't know how to stop themselves, then how can you be mad at them
Yeah,
for even doing it if they don't have the cognitive capability to even stop themselves?
exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, and that reminds me of something that we spoke about before of the, what is it, the sleeping method or
The
what?
sleep training.
Yeah, the sleep training. And I was surprised about it because of like co-regulation that you were talking about. So yeah, dive into that because I was very, very fascinated because I had no idea that,
Mm.
there's a different way of how to do it.
Right. Yeah. So the sleep training is very popular method of teaching your babies how to sleep.
Mm-hmm.
And supposedly, when you leave your child to cry, cry it out, or you leave them to kind of comfort themselves, we expect that they learn how to self-soothe. But
Mm,
the research shows that, again, they don't have the cognitive capacity to self-soothe. They only have capacity to co-soothe with their parent or the person who
mm,
is the caregiver,
mhm,
right? So when we leave the babies and we don't attend to their needs, we don't come up to them, we don't take them in our arms, we just leave them to cry it out. We are not teaching them to self-soothe, we are teaching them to give up. They give up
mm,
their emotional needs because no one is attending to their needs. And that creates a subconscious feeling that your needs are not valid. No one is there
mhm.
to help you. You have to figure it all yourself. It creates like some kind of, and then they say, well, you don't remember it, so it's not important,
Oh my gosh.
right?
Oh my
And,
gosh.
and really, I lived all my life and it wasn't important. I didn't remember it. And
Mhm.
then when my own child started crying, then suddenly all this sadness came out of me, sadness and anger and loneliness. And
Mm.
where did they come from?
Wow. So it was like those feelings, those pre-verbal feelings weren't activated until you experienced that with your own child
Yeah,
experiencing that herself. Uh-huh.
yeah, that's how I felt. And I felt that once I went back in time and gave myself as a baby. So I was imagining that I go to myself as a baby crying in the bed. And my parents, I don't know what they were doing. They were probably sitting next to the door and waiting for me to stop this. But I would go to myself and I would take myself up in my arms and I will rock myself and tell myself that I loved her or me, and
Mm-hmm.
that I would be there for her no matter what. And
Oh,
I felt all these experiences were really healing, because after I've done it for several times, I stopped feeling so bad when my child was crying.
wow.
And honestly, when I had done it enough times to not feel so sad and depressed, when I healed myself, I noticed that she stopped crying so much as well. So
Oh,
it was like a
really?
vicious circle, yeah, because she was like I was freaking out because she's crying, and then she
Uh-huh.
was freaking out that I'm her safe space is freaking out. So we were like constantly um freaking each other out.
Wow.
Mm.
Wow. It's almost like she picked up on your emotions.
Definitely, and they definitely do. So I see with my
Uh-huh.
friends that have kids that do not have much of the childhood traumas, their babies are very calm.
Wow. Wow. I'm so fascinated. I'm also very curious because you're in Norway. And so I'm very like, oh, what's it like parenting there culturally? And
Well, I'm not parenting according to Norwegian standards,
oh.
because here it's considered normal that the kids go to kindergarten from 1 year old,
Uh-huh.
and the parents go to work.
Uh-huh.
But I don't want to send my kid to kindergarten.
Yeah, not yet. Uh-huh.
Maybe not even ever. I'm thinking I could definitely homeschool her. So if that's what she prefers, I will do that,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Wow.
because I feel that I'm not sure it's that easy to find a kindergarten or a school that would follow the same gentle parenting values that I hold.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
I really don't want to, like many people say that, but she has to kind of learn the system. I don't want her to learn the system,
Mm.
because I
Mm-hmm.
feel that there is much more value in being strong within yourself,
Right.
feeling loved, feeling confident, and then you can create a new system if you need
Mm-hmm.
to.
Mhm. Right. And it's always just about, what works for you. Like I always come
Mm.
back to that of how do you follow your own authentic truth, what you feel
Yeah,
is right for you, despite what society thinks. And following that, even if maybe other people might not understand it, because whatever you feel is of your own highest good, then just do that. So,
yeah. I feel that's really hard for moms, because there
mm,
are so many advices and professional advices and
right.
medical advices, and everyone has an opinion on how kids should be raised.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
I've noticed this in moms that I know, that it's really hard to follow your intuition when your intuition is contradicting something that is a truth.
Mm-hmm. Right. Right.
So, for example, I would say this is the most typical example: the bed sharing, sleeping in the same bed as your baby, which has been normal for thousands and thousands of years in all cultures. And now in our Western culture, we say, no, this is dangerous. This is the reason for SIDS, this sudden infant death syndrome. And we should not be sleeping in the same bed with our babies. They should sleep in a separate bed, and from certain age in a separate room, which makes mom's life so much harder, because every time her baby wakes up at night, she has to get up and go to another bed, or
Mm,
get up and go to another room. So then
mhm.
she gets more motivated to do the sleep training and teach her baby to sleep independently,
Mm,
or
mhm,
just give up
mhm.
on their emotional needs and become a good baby.
Right, right. So it's so interesting, right? Because you talked about, oh, this intuition that you have, but then it's going against maybe even science or research. And
Mm-hmm.
so it's like, how do you contend with these two conflicting feelings inside of you? Um,
Mm-hmm.
and also the pressures of what does it mean to be a good mom, or what
Mm-hmm.
is that definition? And it was interesting because I read this book. I think it was about I think Dutch children are the happiest in the world. It was some book. I'll list it in the show notes, but I was very, I mean, because I was so fascinated with Northern Europe and, the Dutch culture. I wanted to move to Amsterdam. I think you mentioned
I've
yeah,
lived
you've
in
lived there.
Amsterdam, yeah.
Yeah. And I was
Mm.
just so obsessed and I learned about it, but it was something that was really surprising was the parents just felt they wanted to be good enough. And it was very contradicting to the American way of like going above and beyond and
Mhm.
um this perfection, of
Mhm.
being a mother, but there was something that these the Dutch parents, they just were very much, oh, it's fine, it's okay.
Mhm. Mhm.
So
Yeah. I feel many people, I would say probably most people, don't want to face their own traumas. They don't want to
mm,
like do the healing, self-healing work. And it's so much easier for them to just replay and reenact the scenarios and the patterns that they grew up with. So then they start doing to their kids what their parents did to them, for example,
mm,
trying to make their life better or trying to be a perfect mom for them. And
yeah.
I don't know, trying to organize a lot of different activities for them. But no one
Mhm.
really, no one really wants, very few people want to actually look within themselves and
Yeah.
see what is there that is preventing me from connecting deeply with my kids. Why do I have to create all these ideas of being a good mom when the only
Mhm.
thing that they really need is my unconditional love?
Right. And that, what does that true connection mean? And, to your point and back, to the topic of this is, how are you truly connected to yourself? And,
Mm-hmm.
you start saying, once I was able to have that inner child relationship with yourself, then, your daughter wasn't as emotional, or she wasn't feeding off of your emotions.
Mm-hmm.
And so it just shows how important it is, especially when, you have the the role of being a parent to someone else. But I do completely agree with you of sometimes it's hard to do the inner work. I mean, it's not easy all the time. But it gets to a point where it becomes painful enough where you realize, okay, I actually do need to do this inner
Mm-hmm.
work. And I don't want to live my life like that anymore. Yeah.
Mm, yes, hopefully it comes to that point
I know.
and not to another point.
Yeah. And
Mm,
so how does it look like for you in romantic relationships now of applying these two practices and all of that stuff?
mm. I feel that my romantic relationships have changed
Mm.
completely. Um, and I feel that for the first time, this time, since I started loving myself, and since I started doing the inner child healing, I have met a person who is also doing their inner child healing and who also loves themselves and is capable of loving me. So I feel like unlocking these two, it was very difficult, but it has brought so much positive result
Uh-huh.
because I feel like for the first time in my life, I'm being in a truly healthy relationship, healthy in a way that there is a dynamic of equality
Mm.
No one is parenting anyone. And no one is trying um, to earn the love, because the love is given unconditionally.
Yeah. So how did you find that he was doing the work also?
I've learned his story, and I
Uh-huh.
saw how he is as a person, so I can see that considering his story, he could have been much worse.
You're like, he's fine now. No.
And yeah, I wouldn't like he wasn't doing it in the same way as I was doing it. I think he was doing it much more in a physical way through like
Mm.
fitness training.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But it definitely gave good results.
Yeah, it's so interesting because I don't know if you get this question a lot, but just of, well, if you're in a healthy relationship now, then how did you get to that point of even attracting that? Or it's almost as if people want that formula of
Mhm.
what did you do to buy this product? No, I'm kidding.
Right. I feel that the most important was the intention, because I had an intention of meeting a man who would love and cherish me at least as much as I love and cherish myself.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, and I wasn't in a rush in any way. I actually honestly thought it would have taken several years, and I was perfectly fine with that. I was
Yeah.
completely fine being a single mom for several years before I eventually meet a person that I want to be in a relationship with.
Uh-huh.
And it just happened so much faster than I thought.
Yeah. And I love that that was so beautiful because you talked about in the beginning of, you had that belief of no one wants a single mom. And you were at that point in your journey of, well, I'm okay with being a single mom. So it's interesting to
Mhm.
see that transformation and that reframe of that mindset. And, you know, the partner came sooner.
Yeah. I've done very heavy healing last summer when I broke up with my ex
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and became a single mom. And I went back to Russia to my parents and visited several healers and
Ah!
psychologists and shamans that were
Ooh. Uh-huh.
available in the area. And it in a couple of months, I think it was 2 months, I felt like I had healed so much. I had healed not only from the breakup, but
Yeah.
on even deeper level. So
Wow.
I found that I was traumatized by the whole relationship. The whole relationship wasn't
Yeah.
very healthy,
Uh-huh.
and I managed to heal not only the breakup but the whole relationship.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
So I felt that there was a moment when I felt I was so happy, I was so free, and I was just completely in love with my experience of being alive. And a couple of days after I met the guy that I'm dating.
Wow. Okay. So it's almost like, and I hear this a lot, it becomes this rite of passage, this initiation of literally becoming your own divine lover. That's
Mhm.
what's necessary in order to call in that partner that you are desiring. Because
Totally.
like you said, once you're able to do that, or you felt that at not only like energetically, spiritually, mentally, physically, but also you just felt that. And so you're in a relationship where there isn't parenting of each other, right?
Mhm.
Because you did the self-love work, you did the inner child work. And so it was truly this this holistic sort of experiential healing
Mm.
journey that you had, which is so beautiful. And you even went back to your home country. And so it's like going back
Mm.
to the relationship with your parents and like, okay, is there any more mending or any more healing that needs to happen there? So,
Yeah. And I don't know if that's for the, but I will share it because it was yesterday was like last, uh, um, the last cherry on the cake of my healing, because I got signed my divorce papers. That,
Stop it. You did.
yeah,
Oh my God, congratulations. Because last week we
thank
were
you.
talking about how you've been waiting for it to be signed by your ex-husband. Oh my
Yeah,
gosh, that's
I've
amazing.
been negotiating for a year and finally yesterday it happened. So I was feeling very
Oh,
happy.
wow, that's so amazing. Did you do anything to celebrate?
Yeah, I did. I baked a freedom cake, a freedom chocolate
Oh,
cake.
oh my
And
gosh.
I had a laugh because like we as girls, we are told from since we're kids, and with in all these like Disney movies and everything, it's like about the value of getting married.
Mm.
And honestly, to get married was so much easier than to get divorced.
I know, right? It's like it's cheaper too.
It's cheaper, it's easier, so it's definitely overrated. Ah, yeah.
Oh my gosh, that's beautiful.
No,
Congrats.
thank you. It was really good.
Hmm. And so, in your healing journey right now, what do you think are the biggest or just current lessons that you are learning?
I feel I'm continuously learning the lesson of loving myself no matter what,
Mm. Hmm.
because there are always different things that come up on this possible list of limitations.
Yeah.
Like you need to succeed in this, or you need to be loved by that, and so on. So it's a constant practice to remind myself that my love for myself is unconditional and doesn't depend on any external people, situations, circumstances, achievements, or opinions.
Mhm.
And yeah, just learning to express myself, learning to trust myself, to love myself even more so that I can show up confidently, so I can share with others, so I can bring more value to this world. This is what I'm currently learning.
Oh, that's so beautiful and juicy. I love that. Um, and something I always end every podcast with is how do you fill your own self-love cup up and connect to the little you? So what does that look like for you today?
So whenever I feel like my energy is going down,
Mhm.
or I feel like I'm feeling a bit sad or lost or confused, I usually go to a mirror and I talk to myself in the mirror. So that's my like go-to pill in
Yeah.
case anything. And I usually just reconnect with myself and ask her or me how she's doing and if everything is fine, and if there is anything and just saying the words that I need to hear, like I love you no matter what, you're beautiful, you're smart, you will get through anything. um, just finding some supportive words for myself. And in general, I feel like self love is a practice that has to be applied to everything. It cannot be like a theoretical practice that you do 10 minutes in the morning. You have to love yourself throughout the whole day and night. I
Mm.
feel like whatever I'm doing, I have to choose myself. I have to choose me. I don't, I Sometimes there are moments when I do have to do something, for example, for my kid that I don't want to be doing. And that's fine. That's life. That's parenting. But I will always do something for myself after to compensate, so that I remind myself that I'm important too.
Oh, that's such a good reminder, right? That immediately when you do something for someone else, whether it's your child or even do something for yourself too. So
Mm,
there is sort of that balance there of not
mm,
over giving or over receiving or any of that stuff. I love that.
mm.
Um, where can people find you if they want to work with you and they want to connect with you?
Um, Instagram, Self Love for Mothers, or I have a website. It is my website from the older times that I made when I just started my practice healing and coaching others. It's called Inner Therapy, innertherapy.no, and no is for Norway.
Awesome. And so I will definitely put that on the show notes, but this is so exciting. I'm so glad that you were on the podcast and thank you so much for joining and just sharing your experience of what self-love and inner child healing has done for you on your journey, your healing journey, and also that perspective of being a mom too. So thank you.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure, and I really appreciate your invitation and your questions, your guidance. It was a big pleasure to talk with you.
Amazing. Thank you so much. All right, everybody. I will share all of the juicy details in the show notes. No need to remember them. But I will talk to you later. All right. Bye, everybody.